I keep thinking about the way Marcus laughed when the old woman told us not to swim. Not a cruel laugh, not dismissive exactly. It was the kind of laugh people make when they're a little embarrassed, a little charmed, and mostly just warm from 3 days of vacation and 2 beers. He put his hand on his chest and nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am, absolutely." And the moment she turned back toward the village, he looked at me and raised his eyebrows. That look, I've replayed it so many times. I didn't say anything. That's the thing I keep circling back to. I was standing right there. I'd heard the same warning she gave us. I understood the tone of it, the weight of it, even if I didn't understand the specific words because her English got soft and slurred at the edges when she was serious. I understood enough, and I said nothing. I just smiled the way Marcus smiled, and I followed him down to the water, and I got in. We'd rented 2 adjoining cabins near the base of the mountain. There were 6 of us, Marcus and his girlfriend Dana, a couple named Fiona and Theo who I'd met twice before this trip, and a woman named Renata, who was Fiona's childhood friend visiting from out of state. I was the 7th wheel, technically, old colleague of Marcus's, invited because he felt bad I'd had a rough year. I was grateful. I genuinely was. The village itself was small, maybe 40 permanent residents. It sat in a shallow valley between 2 ridges, and the creek ran through it diagonally, entering from the northeast corner through a stand of birch trees and exiting toward the south, where it widened briefly before disappearing into the mountain's lower foliage. The water was cold, genuinely cold, even in late July, the kind of cold that registers as clean rather than uncomfortable, at least at first. The locals used the creek for everything: cooking water, garden irrigation. I saw an elderly man sitting beside it one morning just watching it move. Nobody swam in it. Nobody waded in it for fun. I noticed that before the old woman said anything to us, but I filed it under cultural habit, the way you file things when you don't want to slow down and actually examine them. Her name was Marta. She ran the small shop at the village center, which sold handmade goods and local honey and small paper maps of the hiking trails. She spoke to us on our 2nd day, when she saw us walking toward the creek with towels. She was not dramatic about it. She didn't block our path or raise her voice. She stepped out from behind her counter and said something like, "The creek is not for swimming, please. It is not safe. It belongs to the mountain." Marcus did the laugh. I did the smile. We went anyway. The water was extraordinary. I'll say that. Even now, I'll say that. Cold and perfectly clear, moving fast enough over the stones to make that layered sound, the kind of white noise that fills your ears and makes it hard to think about anything outside of the immediate present. We stayed in for maybe 20 minutes. Fiona shrieked when she first stepped in. Theo photographed the light on the water. Dana floated on her back and stared at the canopy. Renata sat on a rock and kept her feet dry, watching us, which I found irritating at the time. I thought she was being precious. I understand now that she might have just been listening. That night was the first time I heard it. I'd gone to bed early, maybe 10:30, leaving the others to their wine on the back deck. The cabin had thin walls, not paper thin, but thin enough that I could hear the low murmur of their conversation without making out words. I was almost asleep when the sound started. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the creek. The best I can describe it, someone whistling a single note, but not cleanly. It wavered. It rose and fell by fractions, never quite landing on a pitch. It wasn't melodic. It had the quality of something adjusting its frequency, testing something, the way a radio sounds when you're between stations and catch a fragment of signal. I lay there and told myself it was an animal, some night bird I wasn't familiar with, the creek distorting something. I'd never spent time in the mountains before, not real mountains, not like this, so I gave myself full permission to be ignorant. There were probably 100 sounds out here I'd never cataloged. I was not the kind of person who panicked easily. I fell asleep. In the morning, I didn't mention it. It felt small. It felt like exactly the kind of thing that would make Marcus smile. We hiked on day 3, a 4-hour loop above the tree line, a view that made everyone go quiet for a good 2 minutes. I felt genuinely good. I hadn't felt that way in a long time. On the walk back down, passing through the birch stand near where the creek entered the valley, Theo stopped and said, "Did someone do that?" He was pointing at a flat rock beside the water. 3 stones had been arranged on it in a loose triangle, positioned too evenly to be accidental. Nobody answered him. Dana said it was probably kids. Fiona agreed. Marcus took a photo. I looked at the stones for a moment longer than the others, trying to locate an explanation that felt complete, and then I moved on. That night, the whistling was longer. I clocked it this time. 11:14 when it started, 12:18 when it stopped. I know because I checked my phone twice. I lay in bed with my eyes open, listening. It had the same wavering quality, but this time it wasn't just one note. It was almost conversational. A phrase, a pause, a phrase. Not language, not song, something in between. I got up and looked out the window. I couldn't see the creek from my cabin, just the lower portion of the meadow and the birch tree line. Nothing moved. No light. No visible source. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes and felt genuinely uneasy for the first time on the trip. And then I told myself I was tired and went back to bed. Renata brought it up at breakfast. She'd heard it too. She asked the group, calmly, whether anyone had heard anything strange near the water at night. She looked at me when she asked. I don't know why she looked at me specifically. Maybe because I was the only one listening carefully enough to confirm it. Dana hadn't heard anything. Theo said maybe, but qualified it so heavily that it didn't count. Marcus said he'd been dead asleep both nights. I said yes, I'd heard something, probably an animal. Renata nodded. She didn't push it, but I noticed she didn't go back down to the creek after that. Day 4 was overcast. We stayed near the cabins in the morning. I walked to the village center alone around noon to pick up supplies and ran into Marta outside her shop. She looked at me for a moment before speaking. Not unfriendly, assessing. She asked me how many of us had swum in the creek. I told her, honestly, 5 out of 6. She made a small sound with her breath. Not quite a sigh. Then she said something I've been trying to decode ever since. She said, "It notices the ones who come in." I asked her what notices. She said, "The creek." I asked her what she meant, and she looked at me with that same steady, assessing expression and said in English that was careful and deliberate, "The creek asks for permission before anything happens there." She said her family had lived beside it for 4 generations, and nobody had ever been harmed because they asked first. She said we had not asked. She said she hoped it would be all right. Then she went back inside. I walked back to the cabin and I went over that conversation the whole way. I sorted it into the category I had for things like this: local mythology, superstition with a long root system, meaningful to the people who carried it, not translatable to outsiders. I genuinely tried to put it there and leave it. The category held for about 4 hours. That afternoon, walking past the creek alone on my way back from the hiking trail extension, I stopped. There were 2 flat rocks at the bank. Both had objects on them. The first had 3 more stones, arranged in the same triangle shape as the ones Theo had found. The second had a hair tie, a pink elastic hair tie. Fiona's. I'd seen her wearing it that morning. She was the only one of us with hair long enough to use it, and the color was specific: faded, dusty rose, the kind that comes from repeated washing. There was no reason for it to be there. No reason she would have taken it off at the creek, placed it on a rock, and left it. I stood looking at it for a long time. I was trying to construct a normal explanation, and I couldn't. I picked it up, I put it in my jacket pocket. I walked back to the cabin. I didn't tell the group. I don't know why. Something about it felt like pulling a thread before I understood where it went. That night, close to midnight, I heard movement outside the cabin. Not the whistling, actual movement. Slow and irregular, like something adjusting weight from foot to foot. I lay very still. I listened. It lasted maybe 3 minutes, moving along the exterior wall from the far corner toward my window, and then stopping. I did not get up. I made myself lie absolutely still and breathe slowly until I was calm enough to think clearly. And what I thought clearly was, this is a mountain. Animals come close to structures at night. That is a fact. That is a normal and well-documented fact. I held that fact the way you hold a railing in the dark. I held it until I slept. Morning was brilliant. Clear sky, warm light, the smell of pine and creek water through the window screen. Marcus made coffee, Dana cut fruit. It was exactly the kind of morning designed to make the previous night's fear feel like a private embarrassment. Then Dana looked at the table and said, "Where's my bracelet?" She'd been wearing a small silver bracelet since day one. A gift, she explained, from her mother. She said she'd left it on the table by the door last night before bed. She checked her room, she checked the deck, she checked the bathroom twice. It wasn't in the cabin. We helped her look for 20 minutes. I said very little during that time. I was thinking about Fiona's hair tie, still in my jacket pocket. I was thinking about the objects on the rocks. I was trying to hold these things together in my head without showing it on my face. Fiona said she was missing something too, a small stud earring from her left ear. She hadn't taken it off. She'd woken up without it. The cabin went quiet. "You probably lost it in your sleep," Theo said. "I've had these for 8 years, Fiona said, quietly. Nobody said anything after that. I excused myself and walked down to the creek, alone. I didn't tell the others where I was going. I followed the bank upstream toward the birch stand, moving slowly, checking the rocks. There was nothing at first, just water and stone and light. Then, near the point where the creek bent slightly east, I found a flat gray rock set back from the bank. The bracelet was on it. Dana's bracelet. It had been placed on the stone the way you'd lay a piece of jewelry in a display case, flat, centered. The clasp was open, folded neatly back. Beside it was Fiona's earring. I stood there and looked at those two objects for a long time. The creek was running maybe 2 feet from the rock. The sound of it was enormous in my ears. I was trying to keep my thoughts organized, and I was failing, because there were only a few explanations, and I was doing the work of eliminating them in real time. Someone from the group had placed them. That was the first option. A prank, misdirection. But I knew Dana's face when she'd looked for that bracelet. She wasn't performing. Someone from the village? That was possible, technically. But to what end, and how would they have gotten into the cabin? I kept coming back to what Marta had said. The creek asks for permission. And under that, another thought that I kept trying to push down and couldn't. What does it do with the things it takes? I took the bracelet and the earring. I put them in my pocket next to the hair tie. I walked back. I gave Dana her bracelet and said I'd found it outside. I thought it had slipped off the porch railing. She hugged me. Fiona's earring I returned with the same story. They were both relieved, and that relief was so ordinary and warm that for about an hour, I almost believed my own explanation. But I kept thinking about the clasp, open, folded back. I thought about a hand careful enough to unclasp a bracelet and lay it flat on a stone in the middle of the night. I thought about Fiona's earring, a post earring, small, the kind that requires a finger and thumb to remove from the back, placed beside it, not dropped, not rolled, placed. I thought about the sound outside my window, the weight shifting foot to foot. That afternoon, I told Marcus I thought we should leave early. I said it casually. I framed it as personal, a work thing. He looked at me for a long moment, and I couldn't read his expression. He said, "You heard the water too, didn't you?" I looked at him. "At night," he said. He was quiet about it, facing the meadow, not me. I told Dana I hadn't because she gets anxious, but I heard it. He didn't say anything else. I didn't ask. We looked at the meadow together for a minute, and then he went inside. We packed the next morning. Everyone. Nobody said it was because of anything specific. Dana said she missed her own shower. Fiona said she wanted to check on her cat. Small, digestible reasons. On our way out, Marta was standing in front of her shop. She watched us load the cars without expression. When I passed her, I stopped. I said, "We're leaving." She nodded. I said, "We're all okay." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "You came in. You're the ones it knows now." I didn't ask what that meant. I got in the car. Marcus drove. The village got smaller in the mirror and then disappeared. That was 6 weeks ago. 2 nights ago, I woke up at 11:40. No sound. No reason. I just opened my eyes in my apartment in the city and lay there in the dark. And the first thing I thought was, that's when it started. The time, 11:40. The same time it began on the second night. I told myself that was coincidence, pattern recognition in a tired brain, the mind catching at numbers. Then I heard it. Single note, wavering, adjusting its frequency. From the direction of my window. I live on the 4th floor. There is no creek for 40 miles. I lay absolutely still for a long time. I kept my breathing even. I did not get up. I did not look. When I finally checked at 12:18, the sound was gone. I got up slowly. I walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty, wet from rain, quiet. On the windowsill, sitting inside the screen, there was a single small stone. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know when it arrived. It was centered, like something placed carefully, like something asking.